Hello and welcome to this next video where we're going to be talking about physical and chemical barriers that the body has to try and prevent infection from pathogens. So what we're going to look at in this video is we're going to talk about the physical barriers that the body has, the human body has, and the chemical barriers that the human body has. So let's look at this. We've got my wonderful drawing here. As I said, I'm a scientist, I am not an artist, but this is my sort of stick person here that is going to represent our body. So we're going to look at two major barriers. The first one's being physical, okay, and then we're going to look at chemical. So let's start with the physical side of things. All I'm going to do is I'm just going to sort of draw some lines. So the most obvious, okay, barrier that our body has that is a physical barrier is the one that basically covers pretty much all of your body, okay, and that is on the outside of you, and that is your skin. Okay, the skin is a physical barrier. It's a physical barrier because it's thick and it's difficult for pathogens to get through. It's basically a wall that they really struggle to get through. Okay, so we've got the skin, which is a thick barrier that pathogens struggle to get through. So, can it stop all pathogens? Well, no, it can't. Find hard to get through. Hard to get through. Okay, so through. Okay, so as I was saying, can it stop all pathogens getting in? No. Think back to the last video. Talked about a couple of things with regards to how we prevent some of these pathogens transferring. If you have a cut in your skin, pathogens can get into that cut. So where the skin is open, pathogens may well go there, and what you'll find is that sometimes they can get infected. There'll be some redness, some swelling, and some white stuff will form, and that's called pus, which is where the body's essentially trying to fight off those pathogens. Another pathogen that we talked about that can get through that skin barrier is Plasmodium, the protist that causes malaria. Now that gets transferred from individuals by mosquitoes, and the mosquitoes can obviously, when they're feeding on your blood, they pierce through your skin. Okay, so skin doesn't stop everything, okay? And in fact, all of the ones that I'm going to be talking about today don't always stop everything. The second barrier is found inside your body. Okay, and these are ciliated cells. Okay, also called ciliated epithelial cells because they're sort of the ones that line the tubes in your respiratory system. Now those ciliated cells, okay, well, what makes them special? So they look a little bit like this, and they have these little hair-like extensions, okay, that go into your trachea. Okay, so let's imagine that this is our sort of windpipe here. Okay, this is on the inside. Now let's say we've got some nasty little pathogens. Okay, here they are. What will happen is they'll get trapped within the hairs. Other things that it can trap, okay, well, let's say we've got some dust particles. Those two will get into those hairs and they will get trapped. Now, what these hairs do is these hairs do a beating motion. And combined with one of the chemical ones that we're going to talk about in a moment, it moves those pathogens and dust up into your throat so that you can swallow it down into your digestive system, or so that it goes, you expunge it another way, okay, whether that be through coughing out or from sneezing, okay, or just blowing your nose. So those are sort of two physical barriers that we're going to talk about. Okay, I'm just going to put a note here. These ciliated cells, they have hairs that trap dust and pathogens. Okay, so what about the physical barriers? What colour should we do these ones in? Oh, let's go for green. Okay, so chemical. So, what chemical barriers can we find? The first one we're going to talk about is actually the skin again. Now, the skin has lots of cells within it, within the organ that is the skin. There are cells that secrete sort of chemicals. Okay, now within that sort of concoction of chemicals, you've got things that are secreted like sweat. One of the things that is secreted is called lysozymes. Okay, so our skin secretes lysozymes. Okay, well, what is a lysozyme? Okay, what is this sort of strange word here? What is it? Okay, now, keen-eyed amongst you will notice that it ends in -imes. What other biological word ends in that? Well, yeah, of course, enzymes. So what these are enzymes that break down the cell walls of pathogens. So when those pathogens hit your skin is sort of continually secreting this chemical. So actually some of the bacteria that lands on your skin might be affected by those lysozymes. Okay, what other chemical barriers do we have? Well, this is one that sort of links in with our ciliated cells. If we think on the inside here, I talked about it in that they're pretty good at moving it around, those hairs. Talk about mucus. Now, mucus, again, is secreted by cells. Okay, well, fantastic. Well, what is mucus? Well, mucus is sticky. That's useful because it will help trap those pathogens and dust. It also contains lysozymes. So again, it has that chemical within it that can affect the pathogen. So therefore, it's a chemical barrier. Now that mucus can then be passed up by those hairs and then passed into the final chemical barrier that we're going to talk about, okay, which is in our stomach. Now our stomach has cells, okay, that secrete hydrochloric acid. Okay, so again, this is secreted by cells in the stomach. Now what does it do? Well, what it does is it lowers the pH to around about 2. Now, why is that important? Well, that's important because when we lower the pH to 2, we're making a very acidic environment, and pathogens struggle with the acidic environment. Okay, so that acidic environment is something that pathogens really struggle to live in. Basically, it can break down their cell walls, it breaks down their structure, essentially killing them. That is why when you tend to sort of cough up mucus, one of your sort of natural instincts is to actually swallow that mucus back down. And that's completely fine and completely normal, because what your body's doing is it's taking that mucus with that pathogens and dust in it and putting it into basically a pot of hydrochloric acid that will kill those pathogens. Now, as with all of these barriers, it's not perfect. There are some pathogens that are adapted to that acidic environment. So if they get into your stomach, while some of them might be killed, not all of them will be, and then they'll get into your intestinal tract, and then they will cause potentially some form of infection in your intestines. And that's one of the things that cholera is adapted to do. So what we've talked about in this video is we've talked about some of the physical barriers and chemical barriers that the body has. The two physical barriers that we've talked about are the skin, the organ that covers most of your body, and ciliated cells that have little hair-like extensions that can trap dust and pathogens. We've also talked about some of the chemical barriers, so chemicals that affect pathogens. So we've got those lysozymes that the skin produces. We've got mucus, which also contains lysozymes, and again, it's secreted. And the hydrochloric acid is also secreted as well, and that changes the pH. Big difference you'll see between the physical and chemical barriers that we've talked about here. The physical barriers are just there. The chemical ones are secreted by cells, and these are the ones of the body. Okay, we're going to talk about chemicals that and barriers that we can introduce in the next video, where I'm going to talk a little bit about sexually transmitted infections and how physical and chemical barriers are useful there, both from the body but also ones that we have produced as well. So thank you very much for watching. As always, it's great to have you along. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Your support is greatly appreciated. So, I will catch you next time. No, that's not how I finish these videos. And as always, I'll catch you in the next video.